everyone. This is Molly Cook. I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. I have a few housekeeping items to cover before we get started today. First, we will be recording this webinar and it will be available beginning tomorrow morning on LiveWell Colorado's website. To access the recording, simply visit about.livewellcolorado.org, visit the toolbox, and then select Webinars in the menu. We will also have some time for Q&A at the end of the webinar. If possible, please let us know who your question is directed to when you ask it. To ask a question, simply type it into the Questions tab on your on-screen control panel. You're welcome to do this throughout the webinar as well, and we will address the questions at the end.
Thank you, Molly, and thank you everyone for being on the call today to learn more about the Colorado Farm to School Primer. This is the second in our Farm to School webinar series, and we're thrilled to have an incredible number of people participating in an incredible panel of speakers to share their thoughts with you today. Our objectives for today's call are to provide a broad introduction to Farm to School, to orient everyone to the new Colorado Farm to School Primer, which you can find on the LiveWellColorado.org website, to share some real-life examples of getting started with Farm to School in Colorado, and I think that's really the exciting part of this call, and to offer some resources and suggestions on how to get involved. So quickly, our agenda. I've gone through the objectives, going through the agenda, give you a little bit of background. Then I'm going to turn it over to Jim Dyer, who is one of the authors of the Farm to School Primer, to share with you an introduction to Farm to School and then an orientation to the primer. And then we're going to hear real-life stories from a school food director, a producer, and a parent/LiveWell Alamosa coordinator / active food council member. So lots of great stories to hear. And then we'll wrap up with a call to action and then give you a chance for questions. And as Molly commented, we do want to save the questions till the end, but please feel free to type them in as you go along. And if you do know who you want the question directed to, if you indicate, that would be great. Otherwise, we'll try to figure out the best individual or multiple individuals to answer your questions. So I want to quickly introduce you to our presenters. You'll see that there's one oddball there that doesn't look like she gets dirty, and that's me. And then we have five great folks really engaged hands-on in the Farm to School work. We have Jim Dyer and Kelsey Reeder from the Healthy Community Food Systems in southwestern Colorado. We have Krista Grand from Durango, Steve Maitland from Fossil Creek Farms up in Fort Collins, and Liza Moran from the San Luis Valley Local Food Coalition. And as I mentioned, she wears many hats. So we're really fortunate to have all those presenters with us. And just a little quick background about LiveWell Colorado. We're a nonprofit organization that's committed to reducing and preventing obesity among all Coloradans by promoting healthy eating and active living in the places we live, work, learn, and play. And schools is one of those primary places that we do our work because we can reach so many Coloradans in that way. With our focus on obesity is because while Colorado is known to be the leanest state in the nation, nearly 20% of our adults are obese and 25% are overweight. And really more concerning is the rate at which our childhood obesity rate has increased. It's the second fastest rate in the country, and we have dropped down to ranking of 23rd. Our obesity rates overall have doubled since 1995, so we're along the same trajectory as much of the rest of the nation as we've started to really see weight, the norming, be really at an overweight and unhealthy weight. And if we continue along this trajectory, only 35% of Coloradans will be at a healthy weight by 2017. And this comes not only at a cost to individuals and to their quality of life, but it also comes with a tremendous cost, with almost $1 billion in obesity-related medical costs on an annual basis, and that doesn't even capture some of the other ancillary costs. So for LiveWell Colorado, Farm to School is one of the ways in which we think we can make a systematic change and improvement so that our children are eating healthier food. We believe that knowing where real food comes from will lead to healthy eating habits for a lifetime. And we believe that local food is less likely to be overprocessed and thus retains more nutrients and is healthier. And the third great benefit and reason for LiveWell Colorado to be engaged in farm-to-school work is that there are so many other benefits of it, which means we have a lot of potential partners and supporters. And I'm going to give Jim an opportunity to talk more about that. But right before I hand it over to Jim Dyer, I want to acknowledge some key contributors to the development of the Colorado Farm-to-School Primer. We couldn't have done this work if we hadn't received funding through the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment through an ARA grant with the CDC last year. So that funding has been tremendous to allow us to do the research throughout Colorado to really get an understanding of that. That work has been led for us by Wendy Peters-Muschetti at WPM Consulting, and her great team of Jim Dyer and Kelsey Reeder did the actual writing and work of the primer itself. We looked at some of the model for the primer came from Vermont Seed, so want to give them some credit for that and tell them we think we've taken it up a step. So challenge for who's going to be next to do an even better farm-to-school primer for their state. And finally, I want to thank and acknowledge the Colorado Farm-to-School Task Force, which is a legislative body that provided invaluable feedback and input throughout the development of this primer and is really playing a key role in moving this work forward across the state. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jim Dyer. Jim is with the Healthy Community Food Systems. That's his organization locally in Hesperus, Colorado. He also is a leader in the Colorado Farm-to-School Network, provides technical assistance through the National Farm-to-School organization, and he's a sheep rancher. He has an organization called Dyer Wool. So with that, I want to hand it over to Jim.
Thank you very much, Lisa. And I want to acknowledge that Kelsey is the co-author is on the phone as well, and she will chime in as needed with questions and answers. But certainly couldn't have done this without her. So what we'd like to do is just talk briefly about Farm to School. We know some of you have been doing this quite a bit for some time. Some may be new to it. So kind of an overview of Farm to School, and then talk a bit about the primer itself. So in the first slide, what is Farm to School? You can see that Farm to School is more than just local food on the lunch plate. It has to do with all the food that the kids get at school and looking to see if we can get the most nutritious, most local, sustainably produced food into those children. So it has to do with the food of different forms, the quality of the food, and how much the kids know about the food and how it's produced. So Farm to School really encapsulates all of those parts. On the next slide, where we look at the origin of Farm to School, we thought it was important, and these are all sections in the primer, we thought it was important to understand where the Farm to School movement had come from so that we could make sure that we know how to enlist partners and how to get the most benefits out of it. And at least in our view, the two things that really gave rise to the Farm to School movement was the local food movement, which is on its surface is an interest in where your food comes from. But much more than just where it came from, it's how it was produced and how good it is for ourselves, in this case for our kids, how it works for producers in terms of their livelihood, how it works for the environment and for the community. So it's a pretty broad set of values that are involved here. The second thing that has really kicked them into high gear, I think, is the growing concern about the obesity epidemic in this country, as Lisa pointed out just earlier. The nice thing about Farm to School is that it gives us a way to address obesity precursors, especially in the early years when things start to get determined. And the other nice thing about Farm to School is that it tends to reach people of all socioeconomic backgrounds. It reaches all kids, it has the potential to reach all kids. And we know the health disparities, including those related to obesity, are very important in different socioeconomic groups. So it's a win-win in that respect. So the Farm to School movement really comes from these two movements or issue areas. And it has to do with, in its purest form, the real essence of farm school is connecting schools and school children with nearby family-scale farms and ranches, and this is how it started. So the closer we can keep to that, I think the better. Now, in terms of the benefits of farm to school, on the next slide, we are looking at a wide variety of benefits that should motivate and resonate with different people in the community. And it's up to us, if we want to have an excellent farm to school program, to keep these multiple benefits in mind so we can capture as many of them as possible. And if you look at most of these bullets, you'll come to the conclusion, hopefully as we have, that at least some of your farm to school efforts should have to do with some very local farms that the kids and the schools can connect with. Now, obviously, we have to go further in larger metro schools and so forth, but at least some of your farm schools should really be looking at that essential connection with a real farm family, and including ranches, of course. This second set of bullets in it, where we say, and in time it should promote, this is the promise and the potential of farm to school that we're excited about. Not only the nutrition and the healthy eating, but also in terms of producers and our economic development in our community. And we do think that in time, not necessarily right now, but in time, farm to school can be a quite stable and profitable and dependable market for many producers. Maybe not all, but for many producers across Colorado. On the next slide, we're talking about connecting schools and producers, and we're doing a lot of work on the state level and on the national level to try to help this happen. But it's not for us at the national or state level to actually make the connections as much as empowering local schools and to seek out and start conversations with their local farmers and ranchers, and likewise local producers to approach their schools. So we provide a lot of tips in the primer, but as I said, a lot of our state work has to do with helping this happen, because that's the only way we'll really get the connections between local producers and their local schools. So we have some tips on this slide that we talk about in the primer. In the next slide, we're talking about really about the education. And the education, a very important and visible part of this, are gardens. That's very much a part of this. This is just as important, at least in our view, as getting the food onto the plate. It's the understanding of the food, where it comes from, how it's produced, how it might be good for me, really generating a new relationship between children and their food. And the nice thing about all these efforts is that it can include the whole school and the whole community. And the best models are those that integrate local food and the knowledge and education about them throughout the school, in activities, in the curriculum, and so forth. So that's kind of the gold bar to strive for. On the next slide, where we start listing just a few of the challenges, and we all know that there are obstacles, or if there weren't obstacles, it would all be done by now. But the challenges of sourcing local foods. But what I'm finding, at least in the initial stages, we know it's going to take time to get to a large scale, but in these initial first steps, the real success depends on that food service director and whether they want to do this or not. And this is, at least that's been my observation. If they want to do it on this smaller initial step scale, they can find a way around the budget issues. They can move some costs around throughout their whole offerings of food, and they can find ways to find that product. They can get around equipment issues and so forth, and that's what we've seen as the success, and I think we'll hear from one of those food service directors in a few minutes that have done this. So it's our job to support them in various ways, and then to take the policy steps and the changes in the way our society looks at what we should pay for food to make this possible on the larger scale. The next slide has to do with some of the results, and this is very early, the early results of the initiatives. And typically we don't have a lot of good baseline data for these sorts of things. But we have good people working on this, and there have been some research that has shown what we would expect to find, that there's increased consumption of fruits and vegetables among younger kids, that it may go beyond the school throughout back home, improved attitudes about the food, awareness, and so forth. So we see these. And this isn't as important necessarily to us who know that this makes sense, but this sort of data and these sorts of research are important to document so that people can make the error, oftentimes as well, hard facts, not just understanding of the promise of farm to school. So that's a challenge ahead of us, and I think we're making some good steps in that direction. Now, we'd like to look at the primer itself on the next slide. And we put this together, and I have the dictionary open here, and unless you're in Britain, you would probably call this a primer, not a primer. We're not trying to blow something up, and we're not trying to whitewash anything. So we'd like to call it a primer, just a small book to introduce and give a sense of a topic. It's not a handbook. It's not a how-to. Talk to Wendy, Pears Machete, or someone else about the how-to about procurement, for example. We've got lots of good resources. This is designed to help two sets of people, those who are already doing farm to school, and hopefully to give them a broader sense of what else they might be doing, how what they're doing fits into the big picture, so they capture those multiple benefits. The second audience would be those people who have not yet started but are interested in farm to school, and to get them off on the right foot, give them some tips, and again, to try to address farm to school in its broadest sense. The audience is really for everybody. We're looking at schools, parents, community members, producers, policy people, legislators, and our task in terms of the audience is to make sure that this would and resonate and inform those people in each of those different sectors. But keep in mind, it is not the hand on how to do it, it's just spring. So we have 5 sections here, and we'll just take okay. This first section is just a snapshot of school food in Colorado, not farm to school per se. So some basic information to help you understand and help the reader understand who pays for it, who's involved in the decisions and the regulations and the support, for example, on this page. Other things have to do with how much money that in food service goes to the food itself or to the preparation and the labor. So a lot of basic, very basic information of that sort. This is extremely complicated to fully understand how this works, but it's essential that everybody have a basic understanding of the major parts of school food so we can be on the right foot in moving ahead. The second screenshot is, for example, is the path to better food. And this is in the section where we're trying to introduce the idea of farm to school, much of what we just spoke about, but some tips about getting started. On this particular page, we have some examples of how a school might start from where they are, take those initial steps, and continue to build their program. In the first case, for example, you might be buying pre-cooked and more affordable, and that's where many of us start. Then you might work on the training and the equipment to handle raw beef, and then the next step might be getting some beef. The gold bar might be local grass-fed beef to capture all of those benefits. So examples how you can get started. And again, these are initial small steps. The next page, the next slide, Colorado possibilities. So go to the Colorado possibilities page. Great. We have a map of who we knew at the time, those who had the survey as to indicating that they were doing farm to school, and you can see the to spread rural, urban across the state. And this particular page has to do, for example, right now we see apples, lettuce, and carrots are some of the prime products the kids are eating. We look at the possibilities in that next column over, the availability. Everybody talks about we're not growing things when the kids need them, but these are products that can be stored for considerable time, and so there's a good overlap with the school year. And in the third column, we're giving an idea of the potential or the possibility. We are looking, for example, at how many pounds of these products would be necessary for any one day, every kid in the state getting a serving. And these are substantial amounts, and this should catch producers' eyes and help them look to capturing this market. And we have good examples and more coming in. Wendy has more that she's going to be publishing in terms of how much money various schools are spending on produce. But we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, which is a great start. The next slide comes from the last section, which is striving for excellence. And the whole idea here, we've got a lot of points here, the whole idea is that we're taking it from where you are as a school or as a producer providing school, taking the small, very important, and very impressive first steps, and then some tips and ways of thinking about that so we continue to raise the bar so that we capture all of these benefits for our kids, for producers, for our community, and for the environment. So those are the 4 sections. The 5th section has to do with the call to action, what various people can do, and we'll pick that up after some of the exciting examples we're going to hear from around the state. So back to you, Lisa.
Great. Thank you so much, Jim. That was really helpful, and I hope for those of you who've gotten a copy of the primer or looking at it online that really helps you understand what it is you are seeing and how you might use it, and that you share it with others who may be partners in your efforts to either get started or move further in Farm to School. If you have not yet seen this primer, you can find it at livewellcolorado.org/schoolfood and go to the Colorado School Operations section. So I encourage you, if you haven't already looked at it, to be sure to spend some time with that. I now do want to shift to our real life stories and give you a sense of some ways that you can get started based on ways that people across the state have been great role models in this work. And I think Krista is one of those. I would almost call her the queen of Farm to School. And she is the food service director for Durango 9R. This is her 8th year with the district and her 6th year developing Farm to School. And I was fortunate enough to get to visit with her last fall and was so inspired by her patience, by her dedication. And as Jim noted, it really does take a food service director who wants to do this. That is the key to overcoming the obstacles and really making this flourish and have fun with it too. She's also a member of the Colorado Farm to School Task Force. And with that, I want to hand it over to Krista.
Thank you, Lisa, and thanks for the opportunity to participate today. So like you said, this is my 6th year as the food service director here in 9R and my 6th year working with Farm to School. And I really began collaborating with the existing Farm to School group that was led by Jim Dyer. And Jim helped create forums for food service directors and producers to start having conversations about how to make Farm to School work, and created a forum where we could all hear about what efforts were happening in the county. And out of these forums and workshops, some of my best relationships were developed. When we did a farmer-chef connection, it was where I was able to make my connection for grass-finished beef for our schools. I also met the farmer that provides our organic peaches, pears, and apples that we served all fall through one of those connection meetings. And in La Plata County, most of our farms are small, so most of them are under 20 acres. So developing relationships is a really big part of how our program works. So what worked for us was that we started really small. We used our salad bars to put local items out in small amounts. And the slide that you can see right now is an example of our fruit that we received from Chimney Rock Farms this fall. So in the past, when we first started, we might get smaller quantities of food, which we would use our salad bars at different schools, depending on how much we received. Sometimes it would go to all of our schools, sometimes it would just go to one. And we built up to the point where you see in this slide that all 10 of our schools receive the quantity of fruit that they need to serve every day of the week as long as it's available. So we started small that way, and then we would focus on National School Lunch Week and National School Breakfast Week and Colorado Proud. And during those, we always tried to feature something local each day. And we built up to the last 2 years in a row being able to serve a completely local meal to all of our students for Colorado Proud. And communication for us is really important, getting information to families about what you're doing. And what worked for us in Durango was to do promotions around some of the things that we were using in our program. So when we first started doing local beef, we invited families to come join us for lunch. We have a local farmer that grows and mills his own wheat, and he has a pancake formula that we use. So when we first started serving his pancakes, we did a big promotion around that pancake and invited all of our parents and staff members to come and have breakfast at their school. And a very important part of Farm to School is the education piece and the meeting of the farmers. And so we had farmer come to those breakfast promotions, and he had beautiful displays about whole grains and all of his products. And when the parents were at the tables with their kids eating the pancakes, the farmer and I would go sit at the table with them and explain what our Farm to School program is, and the children would get to meet the farmer. And then after that event, we actually have, to this day, families that came to those promotions for breakfast still have pancakes with their kids. And on Colorado Proud, we invite parents to join us for lunch, and this year we were able to serve 160 adults that day. And the slide that you can see right now lists our menu from this year's Colorado Proud and has a child with his very healthy local meal on his tray. So some of the advice that I guess I would give would be to use all of your resources that are available, because there's so much going on in the state, and we have so many resources now that weren't available 6 years ago when I first started doing Farm to School. So there's food service directors and just online resources, so many things available now that weren't before. And to start building relationships with your farmers, having conversations about what your needs are, and using the media to your advantage. So in Durango, we were able to have the local paper highlight all of the great things that we were doing, whether they were small or large. And that really made an impression on our administration and gave us support from our upper administration to keep doing what we were doing, because they loved all the positive press we were getting, and that's really important. So knowing the products you're interested in purchasing and being able to provide farmers with usage and pricing, and being willing to have conversations about pricing with your farmers, being flexible and creative on how you can incorporate what's available in your area. And then the last thing I just wanted to mention is we are doing some work here in Durango around food safety and farmer assessment and bid processing. So we're hoping to develop a resource that could be used for any size district and any size farm. And that's it. So thanks, Lisa.
Thanks, Krista. And we're going to, yeah, there's some of those happy families. So thank you so much, and thank you for sharing those helpful hints. And a lot of those things you can find within the Farm to School primer. And we will continue to do more webinars that are targeted to different audiences. But we're hoping that this is giving everybody a sense of the broad range of things and ways that you can, again, either get started or continue with your efforts in Farm to School. Next up, we're fortunate to have Steve Maitland, who is a producer. He's the owner of Fossil Creek Farms, which is an organic CSA in southeastern Fort Collins. So, Steve.
Hello, this is Steve up in Fort Collins, and I guess if I wasn't doing the webinar right now, I'd be making deliveries to 2 school districts. How I got started was, it was probably about 2 years ago. I have to give kudos to the Northern Colorado school districts. They have come together, and they kind of had a meeting with producers that were interested in serving the schools. And we talked about what items we would have available and when they would be available. And then we actually did a bid process and submitted our items that we would have available and when, and our pricing. And then the schools came back and especially the Greeley School District kind of divided up between the farms kind of equally to get all of the producers involved. And right now I'm working with, let's see, 5 different school districts, and my farm isn't that big. It's probably around 12 acres right now, so it keeps me hopping. But one of the biggest challenges, of course, is being able to supply the produce when the schools want it and when they have something menued. And sometimes I run short on things. For example, I had run short on some cucumbers and ended up sending the schools a specialty lemon cucumber or Armenian cucumber, which was great for the kids, kind of introduced them to something they probably weren't used to. And but anyway, the school that down in Adams County, they're actually doing something pretty neat. They're having a farmers market for the kids. So a couple weeks ago, we brought down produce down there, and 4 of the elementary schools down there set up a farmers market for the neighborhood and staff at the schools and so forth. So that was really exciting. I think that was a great idea. But most importantly, the Farm to School program supports the local farmers, and it's been a really great thing for us. And if anybody has any questions, producers, I will be on for the Q&A part of it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Stephen. Thank you especially for making the time to participate. We know it's one of your busiest times of the year and busiest times of the day. So, again, thank you. And I know that people appreciate you being on.
No problem.
Our third real-life story comes from Liza Marin in Alamosa.
Hi there. So thank you for having me on. We're really passionate here about healthier food system as parents, families, and as a LiveWell community. And so I'd just like to tell you a little bit about the San Luis Valley. We are, many of you may know the San Luis Valley, but we're in southern Colorado. We're an isolated rural area separated from the rest of the region by Wolf Creek Pass, Poncha Pass, and La Vida Pass. We number just under 50,000 people in 6 counties. Our land area is about 8,100 square miles, and we're at about 7,500 feet. And we are mainly a agricultural region. That's our heritage here. Very rich agricultural region, but most of our food is shipped out over the pass. And if we do eat a San Luis Valley potato, it's because it's already taken a trip to at least Denver, if not farther, to be bagged up and redistributed back to our school districts on refrigerated trucks. So we're really working hard to change that picture. And one of the first strategies as a LiveWell community was that we were working with community and school gardens, building the ones that were in existence and creating new ones. And in 2008, we got a scholarship to the National Food Security Conference in Pennsylvania, and we decided to send our Alamosa school garden coordinator, Melissa Eminger, and with the agreement that when she came back, she would do a presentation to the community of what she had learned at that conference. And so she did so. We prepared a local foods meal, expected about 15 people. 60-some people showed up, and when she was done with her presentation, the room was loud with conversation. Nobody left, and so the next step was just to plan another meeting. And the San Luis Valley Local Foods Coalition was born out of that. In May of 2009, we invited Mark Winnie, who is a food systems expert and author, and then also Pam Roy from Farm to Table in New Mexico to come present and do a food symposium for us. And we mapped out all the different sources of food, the different farms in our San Luis Valley. We We mapped out all the different, where all the refrigerated trucks are going back and forth. We found out that actually there was a lot happening in the valley, although there wasn't a lot of connection between them. And so from that food symposium, we actually formally created the Local Foods Coalition. We have a mission that the San Luis Valley Local Food Coalition develops local networks, educates the community, and promotes programs and policies that create an economically, socially, and environmentally sustainable local food system for the San Luis Valley region. And that mission statement there was wordsmithing by about 45 people that took about 2 hours to come to. And so in our region, as we know, obesity favors poverty, and we figured out that if every San Luis Valley resident spent $10 a week, that would include children too, $10 a week was spent on local foods, that we would bring more than $3 million to our family farms in the San Luis Valley. One of the things that we created to connect consumers and producers is our local roots guide. And these are producers who are willing to market locally, which many of our producers are bigger commercial farms that aren't ready for that yet. Farm to School became one of our really important strategies. Many families and parents on our Local Foods Coalition, and one of the things that we created was the Child at Heart Food Service Directors Network. And we have 14 rural school districts here in the San Luis Valley. This was our first meeting, and we had 12 of our 14 districts represented here, so it was very exciting. And a lot of this is very new. Many of our food service directors started out as line cooks when they were younger and moved up to directorship positions without a lot of maybe nutritional training or other kinds of support. And so this network has been really valuable for them to share ideas with each other, and also for us to introduce farm to school ideas. One of the strategies was that when an opening for a food service director came open at our Monte Vista School District, one of our Local Food Coalition members applied for the job and got it, surprisingly. And so that was another way that we worked into a school system to support the farm to school effort. And she's very excited about doing farm to school. She actually debuted, on the next slide, salad bars in all the schools on Cinco de Mayo, and we also had a local foods day where everything that we served was local, and it was a huge effort. She actually had to ask for volunteers to come in and help cut and slice and deliver, and so it was quite a learning experience, and she's one of the food service directors who's very excited to do farm to school. But the kids, we invited parents, the kids were very enthusiastic, and the parents just really loved it. And then afterwards we held a cooking class for the parents to learn how to cook quinoa, which is grown here at White Mountain Farms, and that was a really fun way to engage parents as well. In another of our school districts, we have actually a farm to school pilot project with our North Conejos School District, and so Mark Lara is a huge advocate of procuring local foods, and one of the things he talked about, though, is as much as he wants to serve local grass-fed beef, he can get 40 pounds of commodity beef for $2.40. So that there's big obstacles around, because local beef costs about $2.40 a pound is a cry. So but it's been a really fantastic learning experience, and he actually is the chair of our Child at Heart Food Service Network. And then another thing that we've worked on is in 2 of our school districts, we've actually written farm to school into our wellness policy, not as a mandate, but as an encouragement that when they're encouraged to use school garden produce and local food as part of the school lunch and after school snacks when appropriate. And so it's just an encouragement, it's not a mandate, but it also puts that before the school board and also gets them involved in this work. And like I mentioned, we created the Local Roots Food Guide. This is 60 producers who are willing to market locally, and we also have this online now. And then another strategy, which I actually as a parent was very involved with in my own home school district, is school community gardens, and that's a great way to get locally grown food right into the mouths of the children, and they also get engaged in planting, weeding, caring for, and then it's a no-brainer that they want to eat the food. So North Conejos School District has a flowering tortilla garden. He shared that this is his head cook at the elementary school looking at the vegetables, and he shared that over 1,000 pounds of produce has come into his school already from this garden, and there's probably another 500 to 600 pounds still on the ground, and at $2.40 a pound for vegetables, he saved his district over $3,000 in the purchase of fresh produce. Swatch Community Garden, this is just a picture of my homeschool garden here, and getting this going in 2008. And so this garden now is much more robust. Alamosa School Gardens, another garden, and we have a garden camp at this one to get the children. And this is High Valley Community Center in Del Norte, and they also they have after-school programming where the kids are eating out of their garden for their snacks. And then just lastly, as a parent myself, in a small school district, Mountain Valley School has 125 students, pre-K to 12. Our food service director, even though she is a rancher herself, is very worried about the food safety rules, worried that she's breaking rules when she brings in any kind of farm products. And so it's been a slow process, but you really celebrate small steps. And so the first day of school, the kids were served corn dogs with sausage inside and Rice Krispies with white sugar on them. That was the choice for breakfast. And so just as a parent, you want to see some healthier foods in your garden. And our school community garden coordinator provided this calendar of carrots to the school district and gave me the idea to continue to do that, pick carrots out of the garden and take them in. And for Colorado Proud Day, they served every child a carrot, Bugs Bunny style, with the green still attached, which was a great treat for the kids. And so there's just something profound about eating food that you've pushed a seed in the ground and watered. And so thank you.
Thank you, Liza, and I love that story. The idea of kids going from a sugar-coated Rice Krispie treat as a treat to a carrot straight out of the ground is a great way for us to be shifting our thinking. So thank you. I apologize for moving some of those slides too quickly. But I think that everybody still got the view of the story. But thank you so much. Thank you to all three of our presenters in terms of their local stories and ways in which they've gotten things started. I'm going to shift now to Jim again, but remind everyone if you've got any questions to go ahead and start submitting them. And as we wrap up with Jim, we'll be going through our Q&A session. So I'm turning back to Jim to talk to you about getting involved in the Farm to School movement and really a call to action.
Thank you again, Lisa. And we did want to end the primer with just emphasizing the ways that various people could get involved. So we broke this up into schools, farmers, and then everybody else. In terms of the schools, I think you're probably aware by now that we're just hoping that they reach out to farmers and ranchers and make those connections. That takes a little time at first, but the rewards we think will be significant. Secondly, for the school as a whole, try to integrate this whole idea of the food itself and the knowledge about it throughout the school, as many places as you can, in the math class, in the social studies class, in the cafeteria, in the garden. And thirdly, the idea that just get started. Take some small steps. I think we've tried to provide some suggestions on how you might take those small steps and let it build from there. The next slide, we're looking at the farmers, ranchers, and other producers because there are processors and so forth involved in this. Again, we would hope that they would take the initiative and reach out to their schools. Secondly, think about your product and how you grow it and why it's important to you and why you think it's a good product and raised in a sustainable way. And that's your story, and be prepared to tell your story both to the food service person so that you can make that sale, but also so you can help in the educational efforts in the school. And thirdly, keep an eye to the future and be patient with this, because it's going to take a while before this becomes the norm, certainly in the schools. But think of this as their early efforts in farm to school, where you may have to go out of your way, and maybe in pricing and delivering and so forth. But this is an investment in your future as well as in our children's future. And finally, for everybody else, parents, teachers, community advocates, and so forth, again, all of us in one way or another can get involved in your local school, whether that's in the garden, volunteering there, volunteering to monitor a salad bar, being on a wellness community, school boards. You can promote some of these local policies. And then the other side of this would be policies themselves, because we know besides the things happening on the local level, and in effect schools are establishing policies and sourcing and educating about local food, but we need some substantial changes on the state and federal levels in terms of support and regulations and guidance to make this, to get the full potential of Farm to School. So we are fortunate here in Colorado to have the Colorado Farm to School Task Force that is looking exactly at how to move this ahead and provide support models and resources from the state on that level, as well as the Food Systems Advisory Council that is looking at the food system as a whole. And Farm to School is a critical and very important part of that whole food system. So we have those state and federal policies that need to change so that we can get to this point. We also are thinking that rural communities throughout the state may have to band together, school districts band together, in order to have a more effective voice with some of these councils and with decision makers in Denver, because we're so far away and we're spread out. So we heard from Liza about the San Luis Valley Coalition. Krista talked about what we're doing down here in the southwestern part of the state. Western Slope, Northern Front Range, Denver Metro. We have the startings of some regional coalitions that we think are important. So if you're interested in that effort at all, please get in touch with me. My email will be at the end here. So policy is very important, and these are some of the ways that we can move this ahead. So parting words, words of wisdom, you could guess it by now. Celebrate success, no matter how small, and keep striving for excellence. And we hope that the primer will help you in these efforts. So thank you, and back to Lisa.
Thank you so much, Jim. I think everyone, I hope everyone has found some ways that they can consider how to get involved. And we have lots more resources. The livewellcolorado.org/schoolfood is where we have many of our resources around school food. And then really a great resource that pulls all of the different things together that you can find around Farm School in Colorado is www.coloradofarmschool.org. And you've got each of the speakers' contact information, and they all welcome you to reaching out to them and asking your questions, sharing your thoughts. And do know that they're all busy, so give them a break if it takes a little while to respond, and feel free to reach out to me to funnel some of those questions as well. So we are now in our Q&A session. So we've received a few questions so far, and if you could keep those coming, that would be great. I'm going to start with a question for Krista. Krista, cost is an obvious issue, particularly the cost of local meat. Most grants will not cover the cost of food. I'd like to hear some ideas about sustainable ways of supplementing school food budgets.
So, of course, that's a challenge for any school district. We were lucky enough when we did our local beef that we were able to do it at a price that was very close to commodity beef. Since then, we've had to pay a little bit more, so it does take some creativity. So you're not necessarily buying anything different than you normally would. You just have to use the same funds to buy those foods in a different way. And so one of the things that I did this year was our participation at breakfast is really low, so I created a one-week cycle for breakfast and really fine-tuned my food costs for breakfast. And I'm hopefully going to be able to use some of those, what offsets the breakfast funds, towards purchasing foods for our lunch program, which our participation is much higher. So you kind of have to get a little bit creative in how you shift your funding. and how you use your entitlement.
Thanks, Krista. So I think one of the things that I've heard repeatedly is sort of making this work requires some really systemic thinking and thinking about the whole system. But you can start with sort of that first step and that first success.
Right.
Thanks. The next question is for Steve. Is the Farm to School program profitable for farmers?
Yes, I do believe it is. We can get prices are a little higher than if I would go to a wholesale place down in Denver. Not as high as, of course, retail at a farmer's market, but somewhere in between, and plus you get a lot of volume, more volume than you would retail. So I do believe that it definitely is.
Great, thank you. Krista, another one for you, and others may have something to chime in here as well. Where's a good place to get the food safety rules for Colorado?
So you apply the same food safety rules, and I worked with our health department very closely when we were doing farm fresh produce, and so I did trainings using the local health department.
Another food safety question just came in. How can you avoid food safety concerns regarding the delivery of food? Are refrigerated trucks used?
That depends. I mean, I'll speak for Durango. So we are currently, that was the little tidbit I threw in at the end, that we're actually applied for a grant in November. And what I'm trying to do is put together a document that is based on the good agricultural practices and have farmers do a self-assessment. And part of that is working towards safety in delivering the food, receiving the food, how it's grown, how it's handled, you know, all of the whole chain from the time it's harvested to the time you receive it. So we currently are not requiring refrigerated trucks. And there's, it depends on the school district, how they're requiring those deliveries. I know up in Greeley, some of the deliveries come on ice, so the trucks don't have to be refrigerated. There's other ways to keep the product cold. So that would be something that they could develop, or hopefully we will have a resource developed that could help with those protocols for school districts.
Great, thank you, and that's something we'll be sure to be promoting when you have it. And then a couple of questions that are related, and both of these for Liza. With the farmers markets at schools, is that money put back into the schools? And kind of related, in the community gardens, do schools share the food with community members who work in the gardens, or does all the food go in the school?
So we have 7 different school community gardens here in the San Luis Valley that are active, and everyone has different models. Most of them, though, do have community members who share in the bounty. We actually, one of our gardens totally supports the food bank and the homeless shelter, and so it's definitely shared. And the farmers market comment, I believe it was Steve who commented about a farmers market.
Yeah.
That was not us.
Sorry about that, Steve. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, yeah. Actually, they had a budget, and they paid me, and then whatever they sold, yes, it went back into the school. And I actually donated some tomatoes that we had a lot of, so hopefully that was profitable for them, and they were able to keep that money.
Thanks, Steve. I'm going to have Wendy Peters-Muschetti comment on that as well. Unfortunately, our air just turned on in here, so hopefully that's not too overpowering.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to flag that on www.coloradofarmtoschool.org, which is the website Lisa already mentioned, we do have a series of case studies on from a variety of perspectives around the state about how people are integrating local foods. One of the case studies was on the youth farmers markets in Denver. And the farmers markets that are done with Slow Food Denver, Denver Urban Gardens, and Denver Public Schools, the profits from those youth farmers markets go directly back into the school garden programs. And like I said, you can find that youth farmers market case study on that website.
Great. Thank you, Wendy. We just received another question. This one is for Jim, and some others may have things to chime in on, but Jim, I think you have a broader perspective on this one. Do chefs and farmers have to connect directly, or are there any distribution networks or other marketplaces available that can make it easier and less costly in terms of time and money for these to connect?
Well, that's a great question. It really has to do with the scale that you're operating on. Typically, as Krista described, for example, the initial steps would be that Krista's the food service director and the chef, so she is talking with the farmers directly. Now, Steve may be able to add to this when I'm done about how things are done in perhaps some of the larger districts with more volume. But I think that initial step of these questions, especially with individual farmers when there are issues about food safety and there's certainly a lack of clarity about regulations and so forth, and everybody's trying to do this the right way. But that initial conversation is very important. Now, there is a development, and we're all looking for food to the schools, perhaps from a variety of farmers, perhaps through somewhat of what some people are calling a food hub, which can be a lot of things. It could be as simple as a school that is processing some of this food and then distributing to other schools. So we may have a distribution system, mini food hub sort of thing starting, but we want to make sure that it isn't just like the food system we have now where the food is anonymous. We need to keep the information clearly moving along with that food to this food service and then to the kids so they know where it came from. Perhaps, Steve, you have anything to add to that from a producer's point of view?
Usually I talk with the food service directors at the district, and then they have their buyers place the orders with me, and then if I'm out of something or something like that, then we go back and talk to the director and see what we can do.
Great, thank you for that. We have time for just the last two questions. If you have other questions, again, please feel free to send them to me directly or to any of the speakers. And we will be sending a follow-up email that will include all those speaker comments as well as a link to this recording. So actually we have a comment and then a question. An FYI that the National Farm to School Network has a handout on food safety in school gardens, and there's also some efforts underway on a food safety toolkit for farmers. You can find a link to the National Farm to School Network on the Colorado Farm to School Network website. So that's a great, again, a great kind of consolidated resource for you to look at. The last question that was asked is, how does LiveWell Colorado view its role in supporting farm to school across Colorado? And we view it in many ways, similar to many of kind of just our efforts overall. Some of it is making sure that we are educating people about it, which is the purpose of the primer, the purpose of this webinar and the series that we're doing. It is supporting our LiveWell communities and making sure that they have access to tools and resources and inspiration to move this forward within their local communities. We have a whole, a number of other school food-related initiatives that tie in to farm to school by giving school food directors and staff the tools they need to prepare great, fresh school food. So that's an important component of it, that training piece, and again, some inspiration for them there. And so a lot of it is connecting to all the other players. So there's a lot of activity in this within Farm to School across Colorado right now, and along with the Colorado Farm to School Task Force and people like Jim and Wendy and Kelsey really connecting with what those efforts are and promoting them broadly. So with that, thank you everyone for participating on today's call, and we look forward to hearing you on future calls. And thank you so much to all of our presenters for taking the time today.